he one-shots that bitch. Like, she goes down like a sack of Heinz tomato soup. Hello everybody and welcome back to a review that I've been planning to do for some time, but then just never got around to watch the actual movie because I'm a dumbass. So, today we rectified that. I watched Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters. I think I mentioned this back when I reviewed Hansel vs. Gretel, that this was the actual movie that I was looking for when I stumbled across that one. And then it took me like a year and a half or whatever to get around to actually watching this one. But there you go. I knew this one was like a big budget studio movie. Those tend to be less fun for me to review because they're not as stupid as some of the more kind of out there non-mainstream films, but this one was pretty fun. I will say it's not really a serious film, and if you go into expecting it to be like in any way historically accurate, like I don't know why you would, but you're going to be disappointed. It has a very kind of Shrek universe look at the Middle Ages or whenever it's meant to be set. Like, there's missing children on glass milk bottles being passed out, that kind of thing. It's like just a little bit tongue-in-cheek, a little bit funny. I'm going to trigger warn for some gore. There's quite a lot of it in the movie. Also for non-consensual touching, which we'll get into that and why that was a little bit of a weird scene to include as we go. So the movie then, it stars Gemma Arterton and the guy who played Hawkeye. Jeremy Renner? Do I mean Jeremy Renner? I think so. And I think this is back in like 2013, early 2010s. That period where Gemma Arterton was in every movie before, I guess, Jennifer Lawrence took her crown and then she started being in every movie. I love a bit of Gemma Arterton. Although in this she is doing an American accent, which I found kind of weird. Anywho, we open on the movie. We see the classic tale of Hansel and Gretel. They are taken into the woods by their father and abandoned before stumbling across a house made of candy. And it is also made out of very unconvincing CGI. But they eat some of the candy and go inside and are confronted with a witch. Except the witch is kind of just like an orc from Lord of the Rings, but with long hair and wearing a dress. That's basically what witches are in this. And they kind of like move like werewolves. And they're like super fast and jumpy, and they kind of click like the Predator as well. I feel like you could call them anything else and it would still be the same movie, but like they don't really read as witches to me. Not this one in particular. There are a couple later that do. Anywho, she clicks at them for a bit, and then we cut to Hansel being in a cage while Gretel has to stoke the oven for him to go in. They manage to escape, obviously, because that's the story, and then they push the witch into the oven and she burns to death. Over the opening credits, we then get some sort of old-timey woodcut newspapers, which I found quite funny, detailing the heroic deeds of Hansel and Gretel, the witch hunters. And then we get to modern day. We interrupt a scene already in progress in a town where the local sheriff is trying to have a woman executed for witchcraft. A uniquely not orc-looking woman who just is a normal, attractive lady. And Hansel and Gretel aren't having it. So they interrupt the proceedings. Hansel checks her over and says she doesn't look like a witch because witches are like all rotted. And you can tell because they can't hide their horrible orc-like appearance. And I took that personally. But he says that they shouldn't kill her. There's a lot of swearing in this bit, and Gretel's just like, cut her loose now or I'm going to blow your brains out all over these fucking hillbillies. So we've added some dark and gritty swearing to the story, and that plus some leather pants just makes this out to be the fantasy action movie we were all expecting. The mayor interrupts the whole proceeding, and it turns out he's hired Hansel and Gretel because of their witch problem, all the children going missing, yada yada yada. It's so standard. The sheriff is not pleased about this. He doesn't want them involved for I don't really know what reason. Obviously in this part Gretel breaks his nose, but I feel like that's not really enough for him to be this against saving children. Like, there's no inclination that, like the characters in the Brothers Grimm, the movie, which I'll probably review at some point in 4 years when I get round to it. But there's no indication that Hansel and Gretel are frauds. They very much have done all the things that they claim that they have done. They have killed witches, so I don't understand why the sheriff is so against them being employed. Is it because he doesn't want to have his position of authority challenged? It's really unclear, and he's kind of a bit part antagonist anyway, but it kind of annoyed me that there wasn't really a lot of reasoning given for that. Anywho, Hansel and Gretel are dispatched to a remote cottage, which is their one and only lead on the missing children, until it isn't, but we'll get into that in a minute. When they get there, they are instantly attacked by a witch and shoot at her, and then there is a kind of lengthy fight scene. I find the fight scenes in this movie confusing. There's a lot of very rapid cuts, and some things don't really make sense. Like, the witch flies away on a stick, which is kind of cool, but at that point Hansel and Gretel are chasing her, and then Hansel is in front of her and knocks her off the broom using his, like, shotgun, like a baseball bat. But it's like, but he was chasing her and she was going about 400 miles an hour on a stick, so how did he get in front of her? It makes no sense, but there is a fight scene. They don't really find much in her house except a handy-dandy poster, which has all this astrological gubbins on it, which basically translates to, the blood moon is coming up soon, it's a super sacred time for witches, and they're going to be doing some bad shit on that day. During this conversation back in town, Hansel injects himself in the leg with something, and it's made clear later on what this is, but I just thought I'd mention that happens. There's kind of some mystery going on at this point, and I think that's why I was enjoying this part of the movie, is because in the opening scene, the witch tries to blast baby Gretel with magic, but don't do anything, and this seems to confuse her. And now we've got the added mystery of, you know, Hansel and his mysterious injections. So, although these mysteries are probably not going to be incredibly hard to guess at, you still kind of want to keep watching to see if you're right. And I was, so hooray for me. Hansel and Gretel decide it's too dangerous to head off into the woods to hunt witches in the night time, which is sensible, but the sheriff meanwhile hires his own little gang of mercenaries who do go into the woods in the night time, so predictably they are approached by a beautiful woman who then morphs into a horrific witch and then kills them, all except for one who she puts bugs into, and he eats some dirt and worms, and then sort of staggers off back to town. It's kind of a big deal that this woman is going against the grain of witches be ugly, so I was gratified when that actually got mentioned later and it wasn't just left as a plot hole. In the village tavern, Gretel is reading the files and works out that some children were taken while others were left behind, which is very not witchy. And also the witches are working with trolls, which is apparently something they haven't really seen before. So all signs point to this being something new and weird. They meet this guy who's like their super fan, and he shows them his scrapbook. He's just kind of a bit character. I didn't bother learning his name. We again hear that witch magic doesn't work on Hansel or Gretel, and they don't really know why this is, and it seems like Hansel doesn't really want to discuss anything about their childhood. He's still very, I guess, raw about the whole being abandoned in the woods to die thing. The mercenary that was left alive arrives saying he has a message from the witch, and then blows into meaty chunks, spattering everybody with blood, except for Hansel, who's hiding behind the superfan at this point, which did give me a chuckle. Apparently he was a victim of the curse for hunger for crawling things, which sounds cool. So I guess there was no message really, it was just a haha, exploding man. 3 witches convene, including the main witch, whose name we don't really know. I think maybe at one point someone calls her Julia, but I'm going to call her main witch. A witch who looks like Pinhead from Hellraiser, and a witch who has red hair. So those are the main 3. Gretel has an intriguing dream about their past in the house. She remembers their mother coming to them in the night and telling them to like get up before they were abandoned, so maybe something to do with that is going to be revealed later. The woman they save from being executed, whose name is Mina, but for the longest time I thought it was Nina, so just FYI, those are the same person if I switch between the two. She chats up Hansel a little bit and is like, how do you feel about witches? And he's like, the only good witch is a dead witch. And she looks at him like, I'm a witch, you bastard. So, pretty clear Nina Mina is a filthy, dirty witch liar. They chat for a little bit and his wrist timer watch steampunkness goes off, and it turns out he has to inject himself with insulin or something They never actually specify what it is, but he says he suffers from the sugar sickness because at that time he ate half a gingerbread house. And she's like, oh, I know about that. Maybe I could help you with it. And he runs off to go set up a mannequin in the forest to catch a witch. The pinhead witch arrives, hearing a child crying. It is in fact the mannequin and some sort of steampunky Middle Ages Victrola, which is just playing a record of a child calling for help. It didn't really bother me. I know this kind of thing bothers some people and they're like, oh, that's not really realistic, or that's really ridiculous, but I kind of like these weird and stupid fantasy action movies. They're a good time. But she attacks with a mannequin and then Hansel corners her. There's another fight scene which is very confusing to watch. They drag her back to the town to be tortured for information. I say that, they punch her in the face once and then she tells them everything, so... I mean, I think Pinhead would be disappointed in her. Literally just one punch to the face and she's like, here's our evil plan. She says the blood of 12 moons will be collected and one object remains. Hansel and Gretel quickly piece this together CSI style, that they need 6 girls and 6 boys, all born in different months of the year, and they are missing one girl born in April. They go through the town records, which are really good for this time, and find out who that girl is and go off to try and save her, but get split up. So Hansel goes after the girl and the witch who is kidnapping the girl, and Gretel gets waylaid by Main Witch. Main Witch says to Gretel that she has something she needs, the last ingredient. So at this point I'm like 99% sure that Gretel is a witch. Their mum was a witch. Nina's also a witch. There are good and bad witches, I guess, and the bad ones are ugly and the good ones are pretty, because I guess that's how fairy tales work. Hansel goes off to pursue the missing child, but somehow ends up hanging from his ankle in a tree. Gretel gets knocked out in the town and rescued by the superfan guy, who is like wiping her face with a damp cloth and then kind of looks down her top and then starts wiping her boobs with it, just so she can be like, what the fuck are you doing? Which, I don't get why this needs to be there. It just makes me not like this guy who's meant to be on the side of good, one of the comedic characters. It's like, oh yeah, imply that he's kind of a rapist. That makes me find him amusing. There we go. He asks why their parents left, and Gretel's like, you know what? I don't know. I'll have to check and get back to you, because I've never thought about my own childhood for some reason. Then Gretel says that only grand witches can change their faces, so I guess Main Witch is also the grand Main Witch. It's then revealed by her recognising her mother's face in a woodcut image in this guy's scrapbook that her mother was accused of witchcraft and executed, and that Hansel and Gretel would have been sent away so that the villagers wouldn't have found them and killed them as well. So what she thought was an abandonment was actually, you know, her life being saved, which is quite predictable, but is also kind of a nice spin on the Hansel and Gretel story. Nina finds Hawkeye dangling from a tree in the forest and gets him down, and then gets him to skinny dip with her in a healing spring. Because reasons. Gretel goes looking for him, but can't find him, and during the course of this looking for him, she's attacked by the sheriff and his men. The sheriff is real unhappy that she broke his nose, and then he's even more unhappy when she bites part of it off. Bitch is hardcore. Unfortunately, fortunately, this fight scene, which is very one-sided because it's like 4 men against Gemma Arterton, it is interrupted by a massive great troll which beats all the men up, smashes the sheriff's head in, and then carries the unconscious Gretel to a stream to tend to her wounds. And he tells her that his name is Edward, and she asks, like, why have you saved me? And he says it's because trolls serve witches. So, pretty obvious she's a witch. Somehow, Hansel has been wandering, like, we left him skinny dipping, and now he's wandering the woods at night time. So there's a big gap of time here where we don't know what he was doing. I don't know what to tell you. But he gets into this old rundown house, which he finds in the forest, and gets jumped by Gretel. Unclear how she got there either. There's, again, just this massive gap in time missing. But they attack each other because they think each other is, like, an evil witch in the forest. They fall through a hole in the floor and realise they're in a cave full of witch stuff. And I'm like, oh my god, there's a cave full of witch stuff under their old house. It takes them a really long time to realise that this is their old house. Even though they were like 7 when they got abandoned in the forest and should probably remember what their own home looks like. But they're only just getting around to the realisation that their house had witch shit underneath it, and that their mother was probably a witch, when the main evil Grand Witch of old London town turns up and confronts them and tells them that their mother was Ariana, or Adriana, the Great White Witch. There you go, see? And apparently, oh my god, I forgot to explain this earlier. Right, so the witch's big evil plan, which doesn't really matter because it's pointless, is to make a potion that when they drink it, it will make them invulnerable to fire. And you would think from me saying that fire would be the only thing that can kill a witch, except we're told by Hansel that you can also cut their heads off or pull their hearts out. You know how you would kill most things. So fire is really only one method of killing them, but they want to make this special potion to make them fire retardant. They never even get close to managing to achieve that, and it's kind of just not even relevant to the plot, but there we go. But it turns out they have to make this potion during the blood moon. That's what they need the blood of the children for, and also they need the heart of a Grand White Witch. And Adriana was too powerful, so they decided last time to kidnap Gretel and accuse Adriana of witchcraft so her and her husband would be killed, but then the blood moon was over before they found Gretel, so better luck next time. Except not really, because if anything they were actually closer last time than they are now. Hansel attacks the main Grand Witch after hearing all this. He gets stabbed and Gretel gets kidnapped. So, good job, Hansel. He wakes up having Nina/Mina tending his wounds and has healed him with her witchcraft, because, spoiler alert, she's a witch. And she's like, there are good witches and we're pretty, and there are bad witches and they're ugly. And he's like, wow, this is brand new information, thank you. They also find somewhere hidden in the basement the big bad book of anti-evil magic, which tells them how to bless things to make them better at killing evil witches. So they have Nina whip up a batch of this blessing stuff and chuck it all over their many, many piles of guns and bullets. So, thus armed to the teeth, they enter the forest, they meaning Hansel, the creepy rapist guy, and Nina/Mina, and go looking for Gretel. The evil witches assemble, and all of the evil witches are either kind of orc-looking like the main three, or they are of a different race, or they have some sort of bodily disfigurement. So it's basically a case of, like, if you're not just a pretty white lady with nothing wrong with her visually, you're evil, which is not really a message I want to get behind. Some of the designs are cool. There's, like, a pair of twins who are, like, joined together, but during the fight that gets, like, shot through, and then they fight independently. So it's kind of interesting from, like, a weird alternate makeup effects point of view, but it's pretty damn dodgy from every other point of view. The evil witches assemble. They draw out all the kids who are definitely going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Hansel confronts them and shoots one witch with his blessed gun, and he one-shots that bitch. Like, she goes down like a sack of Heinz tomato soup. And then from above, Nina open fires with a blessed Gatling gun, and that's pretty much all she wrote. Out of all the fight scenes in the movie, this one feels the most low stakes, because they are so over-armed. Like, Hansel has his, like, magic gun. There's a Gatling gun raining down fucking death on this crowd of witches. 90% of them die in the first volley. It's a massacre. I nearly felt bad for them. There's never really any question that they're going to even partway succeed with this. One of the witches tries to kill the first of the children. Like, I don't want to tell you how to run your cooking show, but maybe you should have pre-diced them for convenience. But she tries to kill the first child and they kill her, so not a hair on any child's head is damaged, and the main witch escapes. During all this fight scene MacGuffininess, the blood moon ends, so there's officially no point in even trying to do the spell, and like I said, that is kind of a weak plot point and it's just forgotten about in the face of the main witch coming back to just keep attacking them for no real reason. She doesn't even seem annoyed that they foiled her plan. She's just attacking because she's the bad guy in the movie. Edward frees Gretel and then gets punted off a cliff, so Gretel goes to save his life, while Hansel and Nina pursue the evil witch, who has been shot down by the weird, creepy, rapist superfan guy, and has landed in the original gingerbread house, so that's where our final confrontation is happening. It's kind of a cool scene because it's like the rotten candy house. It's kind of interesting. But this part of the movie annoyed me because it felt like, up until now, Gretel had been involved in all the fight scenes. We'd seen her do some pretty kick-ass stuff. Here she is just absent. We find out that she's a witch, and suddenly she stops being able to fight. She doesn't do anything. She just stands there handcuffed to a post waiting to be rescued. And then she runs off to save Edward by tasering him in the heart. But she doesn't really do any fighting except when Hansel is down and he needs a couple of seconds to get up. She offers some token resistance to kind of hold the line until he's able to become the main fight scene person again. So that was really disappointing. Anywho, everyone convenes on the house. Nina is brutally stabbed to death by the evil witch, and honestly I thought they were going to walk this back and resurrect her, but no, she dies. So that's sad. Hansel will never forget the woman he knew for 3 days. They have a little bit of a fight again. Gretel doesn't really do much, except when Hansel's beeper thingy goes off and he realises he needs insulin and he falls down. So she crawls over and injects him and he pops right back up like the Energizer Bunny and finishes the day. Gretel comes in right at the end to kind of help decapitate the main witch with a shovel, but like 80% of the fighting here is just done by Hansel. They then leave the cottage and Gretel picks up the evil witch's wand and it glows. So I was like, oh cool, she has powers. Now all we need is for the witch or a witch or something to attack them so that she can show these off. She doesn't. Literally nothing happens. We then get kind of a sort of epilogue sequence where they're in the desert. Edward is there, the creepy rapist dude is there. They're pulling a cart of these like witches that they've killed. Hansel and Gretel are still on their crusade, using their powers against the evil witches, now that they know that good witches exist as well, but they've never killed a good witch that we've seen, so basically nothing has changed. And again, even in this fight scene, which kind of goes into the credits, Gretel doesn't use any magic, she just uses some guns. So I was kind of disappointed because the whole plot of the movie is like, okay, there are witches and they're basically like evil orcs. And then we get some of the evil witches that are a bit more like sentient humans. And we do see them using some magic and the way they fight with that is quite fun. But then we find out there are good witches and it's like, great, Gemma Arse-Kicking Arterton, aka Gretel, now has magic powers. So she should be twice as effective at, you know, fucking shit up in the climax of this exciting action movie. And she just stands there doing nothing. Never see her use magic. We see Nina use it once to blow up a tree before she gets stabbed to death. So they had a lot of witch characters and none of them did anything remotely interesting, really, in the second half of the film, which was really disappointing. Not incredibly enamoured with that. But to be fair, up until that point I was having a pretty good time. Pretty decent fight scenes. There were some good one-liners, even if the swearing and the old westy type vibe of things in a Middle Ages fairy tale setting was really kind of ridiculous at times. But it was a good watch. It was like a pretty fun Sunday afternoon, I want to turn my brain off and watch someone get kicked in the eye kind of movie. So I recommend it if you're into it. Definitely some interesting costuming and design, and it definitely has at least 3 sexy witches in it, so you could do worse. I promise I will eventually get round to googling if Brothers Grimm has a witch in it and if I need to review that movie. Maybe you could tell me in the comments down below. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next episode.